9 horsepower, 7 inches of ground clearance, 124 raging cc's. What are we talking about today, Alex?
We're talking about the Honda Dax, or the sausage dog, as Honda likes to call this.
Honda called it that themselves in their own press release, called it the sausage dog.
So that's why we put this image up here on the screen. I love dachshunds, so I'm super happy about that. But this is super exciting news. We love our MiniMOTOs here. We also love our CT70s, our old Trail 70s, and Honda's bringing back an old nameplate that hasn't been around for over 4 decades.
Yeah, although it depends on what market, because the last Dax anything that was made was discontinued in 2003. But this is the Dax 125, and it's basically a CT70, or it's what the CT70 was back in the day. The Dax name is what it had overseas, or ST70, and now it's back. And this is arguably going to be the coolest MiniMOTO in Honda's lineup. The only disappointment is that this is a European press release, but stick around to the end. We have reason to believe that this might be coming to the States.
Yeah, we have pretty good reason to believe that. So let's just start off with the general design of this bike, because it looks really identical to the old CT70s, the Trail 70s. You can see that in the frame design. It's got this kind of T-shaped frame, exactly.
It, yeah.
The same sort of seat design. You have that chrome bar on the back that a passenger can grab onto, a high upswept exhaust with holes and slots drilled out in it. Pretty much from every angle you look at this bike, it resembles the old one very closely.
I mean, the entire way that this is laid out, the architecture of it, the way that the engine is mounted, everything about it looks a lot like the old school model, and even the intake on the far side of the bike has a very similar shape to the old school model. Of course, you're going to get certain things that you didn't get on the old school model. You've got inverted forks. You've got ABS on the front wheel that's IMU based. You have an LCD screen. You have full LED lighting. So there's a lot of modern components here that let you know this isn't actually an old school bike, but they did a really good job bringing that old school design forward and making it look a lot like the original.
Yeah, I mean, you can even see that in the graphics, right? Like the Honda badge is the old school Honda wing logo.
Yeah.
This badge here that's kind of underneath the seat, that's really similar to what they use on the old bikes. And even those stripes underneath the Dax badge, that's exactly what they used on the old Trail 70s.
Now, for power, you get a very familiar fuel-injected 124cc air-cooled single-cylinder engine. Like I mentioned, 9 horsepower, 8 pound-feet of torque. You get a 4-speed centrifugal clutch where neutral is all the way in the down position. So this is a very familiar setup, not only to bikes like the Super Cub and the Trail, but it's even pretty similar to a lot of the old-school Dax bikes. You've got that centrifugal clutch. You've got a very similar setup to what you would be used to on these old school bikes.
Yeah, and once again, just like the Super Cub and the Trail, this is going to be a great bike for beginners. You don't have a clutch lever to worry about. So if you're just learning how to ride, all you have to do is shift gears, worrying about getting out of the way of traffic and stuff. So one less thing to think about. If I were buying this, I'd obviously like to see a clutch on it, like we've said many times. As you kind of get more into riding, you like to see that kind of stuff. But there's always a place for a good entry-level beginner bike like this.
A few more numbers direct from Honda. They claim 149 miles per gallon, a 56 mile per hour top speed, and we know from previous testing that Honda's claimed top speed isn't necessarily the speed that you can get up to. I went a good bit beyond the top speed that's claimed for the Grom. But 1 gallon tank and 150 mile range, which makes sense. 150 miles per gallon, 1 gallon of gas.
And in these current times, I mean, that is really impressive, and that matters a lot these days. So really cool to see 149 miles per gallon out of a bike like this.
And 150 mpg sounds like a ridiculous figure, but we've done testing with Honda MiniMOTOs in the real world, and I took a Trail 125, which is a larger bike, and I rode it uphill into the mountains at highway speed, and that motor was wrung out, and I was going 50, 60, depending on how flat it was, and I got 133 miles per gallon, gaining elevation and ringing that engine
That was
out.
A hard test. That's 133 miles per gallon in some of the hardest conditions you'll probably ever ride a trail.
So I 100% believe that this gets 150 mpg. And another thing that interests me about this bike compared to other MiniMOTOs is that you might be thinking, vehicles, as they get new, they tend to get bigger. This is probably going to be bigger than the old Trail 70. It's going to lose that fun charm. But actually, the wheelbase on this bike is ever so slightly shorter than the classic CT70s. So we're hoping that size-wise, this is more like the classic MiniMOTOs, because the Trail 125 next to like a Trail 90 and the Honda Monkey, all of those bikes, especially compared to an old CT70, the newer MiniMOTOs look a lot bigger than the classics.
Yes, they are a lot bigger. Like you said, we've done some videos over at Andy's place where we put some new ones next to we put some old ones next to the new Monkey, and you're right. The new Monkey just kind of, even though it's a MiniMOTO, it towers over some of those bikes. So I hope you're right. I hope this is a decent bit smaller than some of the other ones that are out there. We do know the weight of it, which is about 235 pounds. Quite a bit heavier than the old Trail 70, which came in between like 135 and 165 pounds.
And that makes sense. I mean, it's got ABS, it's got more modern suspension, it's got more electronics, that LCD screen, so it's bound to be a little bit heavier.
Yeah, but it weighs pretty close to what like a current Navi or Grom or Monkey weighs, so we'll just have to wait and see when we actually get some seat time on one or get up close and personal what the size is actually like.
So a few more components on this. 31 millimeter inverted forks, so it's very fancy. You get twin shocks on the rear because it's old school. 12-inch wheels, and again, disc brakes front and back, ABS, so a lot of modern components that will make this a nice, pretty safe, good thing to ride.
Yeah, fuel injection, LED lighting. People are going to see you out on the road. You have a modern instrument cluster with, trip computer and odometer, things like that. You also get passenger pegs and a passenger grab bar and a big long seat, which is really cool. Yeah, it's huge. This is the only retro-styled Honda MiniMOTO with passenger accommodations. The Trail 125, the new Trail, has a really tiny, kind of like a bicycle-sized seat, no pegs.
Similar to the Super Cub seat.
Similar to the Super Cub. The Grom has passenger accommodations, but it's totally
retro,
different
yeah.
style. It's not retro. The Monkey doesn't. So if you want something super retro, small and cute from Honda to carry two people, this is going to be it.
Which is badass. Because carrying two people on a MiniMOTO, I mean, you don't have a ton of power, so it's maybe not the most practical thing in the world, but it's really fun. So that's really cool. You also will be able to choose this bike in either Pearl Nebula Red or Pearl Cadet Gray. I personally like the gray a lot. I think that's an awesome looking color on this bike, a little understated.
Yeah, I wish they brought back like that light blue or some of the yellows and oranges that they did on the old Trails. That would be really cool.
And I mean, with year to year, all the Honda MiniMOTO color palettes change. So over time, I'm sure you'll get even more retro color schemes coming out. And speaking of things about this bike coming out, we have to talk about this bike and the US market. So this is, like I said, a European press release. So Honda has not stated any plans for this to come to the US, but in the European press release, they mentioned the US market 5 times. They talk all about how this bike, when it was originally made, was intended to be a slightly larger alternative for the Z50 for the US market. It was also for the European market, but they mentioned the American market a lot.
I think it's pretty safe to say.
I think it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, pretty reasonable that this is going to come here, and I really hope it does because, I mean, look at the Navi, look at the Trail, look at all the Honda MiniMOTOs. They're hard to get. People want them. They're there's a crazy long wait list for Navis at local dealerships around here in Colorado right now. I don't see why this would be any different. I think the demand for this would actually be even greater than the Navi.
Potentially, yeah.
The Navi does have a pretty killer price. This probably won't come close to that. Speaking of price, let's jump into that for a minute. Honda hasn't announced any pricing for this yet, but we do know the pricing for all the other MiniMOTOs. They're all right around $4,000.
Yeah, the only one that's over $4,000 is the new version of the Monkey that's at $4,199.
So yeah, low or high 3s, low 4s is probably where this will come in at.
Yeah.
If it makes it to the U.S.
Yeah, and it will, I would imagine it will absolutely be priced more than the Navi because it has the more premium 125cc powertrain, and just looking at this, you can see it's got the same build quality as the Trail, the Super Cub.
It'll definitely be
Monkey.
More than the Navi.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's
cool.
The Honda Dax, or the sausage dog bike, as Honda likes to call it.
Yeah, they even gave it a sausage dog logo that's on the motorcycle.
Yeah, and it's got wheels, a helmet, and goggles on it. I love it. Absolutely
Pretty
love
good.
it. Yeah, so there you go, guys. There's the Honda Dax. please beg Honda in the comments below to bring this here to the U.S. so we can ride it and have fun
send
with
letters,
it. Yeah,
form a rally.
exactly. And we'll see you in the next video.